A new manager looked me dead in the eye through that conference call and said, "Look, Hal, if you're not comfortable with the direction we're taking this department, maybe it's time you started thinking about your next chapter somewhere else." That was it. No build-up, no formal warning, just that, delivered with the same casual tone you'd used to tell someone the coffee machine was broken. I'd been with Greenfield Systems for 19 years. Let me say that again so it lands the way it landed on me that Monday morning. 19 years. I started there when my son was still in diapers. I built their entire network infrastructure from a server room the size of a closet into a distributed system handling federal contracts across 4 states. I knew every cable run, every firewall rule, every vendor relationship in that building. When our biggest government client had an audit, they asked for me by name. Not the company. Me. My new manager had been there 11 months. His name was Brent. 34 years old. MBA from a school I'd never heard of. He came in with a mandate to modernize the culture, which in practice meant replacing anyone over 50 with contractors who cost half as much and knew a quarter as much. He had the kind of confidence that only comes from never having been wrong about anything important, yet. Everything about him was performance. The rolled-up sleeves, the standing desk, the way he said, "Let's circle back," when he meant, "I'm not listening." I was 53. I'd seen managers like Brent before. They cycle through companies like Weather Systems, leave damage, move on, get promoted somewhere else based on short-term numbers that look good until 18 months after they're gone. I'd outlasted 3 of them at Greenfield. I figured I'd outlast Brent too. I was wrong about the timeline. But not about the outcome. The Monday morning he made that comment, I had been pushing back, professionally, calmly, on a new vendor contract he wanted to sign. The contract would have replaced our core security monitoring system with a cheaper cloud solution from a startup that had been in business for less than 2 years. I'd done the evaluation. The gaps were real. If we ran that system on our federal contract infrastructure, we'd be out of compliance with the terms of our existing government agreements within 90 days. I put it in writing. I sent it to Brent, to his manager, to the compliance officer. Brent didn't like that. He didn't say you're wrong. He said you're not being a team player. He said you're resistant to change. He said legacy thinkers hold companies back. And then, on that Monday call, he said what he said. I didn't respond. I unmuted, waited exactly 3 seconds, and said, "Understood. Thanks for the context, Brent." Then I muted myself again and wrote one note in the legal pad I keep next to my keyboard. The date, the exact words, the time. That was the beginning. What Brent didn't know, what he had no reason to know because he'd never bothered to understand what I actually did at Greenfield, was that 3 years earlier I'd developed something on my own time that quietly became very important to the company's federal work. I need to back up a little to explain this right. In 2021, during a stretch when I was working from home and had more mental bandwidth than usual, I started building a compliance audit tool in my own time. Personal laptop, personal cloud account. I wasn't doing it for Greenfield specifically. I was doing it because the problem annoyed me, and I'm the kind of person who solves problems that annoy him. The federal compliance landscape for IT contractors had gotten complicated. There were new requirements from NIST, updated CMMC standards coming down the pipeline, and every company I knew was scrambling to manually track their compliance posture. I thought there had to be a better way to automate the documentation. I worked on it on weekends. I worked on it during the 2 weeks I took off the following summer. I used no Greenfield equipment. I used no Greenfield data. I used no Greenfield time. I finished a working version in early 2022 and, somewhat naively, mentioned it to my then manager, a decent man named Aldridge who'd been with the company for 15 years and actually understood how the work worked. He got excited. He thought it could save the compliance team dozens of hours per quarter. He asked if I'd be willing to let Greenfield use it. I said yes. But I was careful. I am not a lawyer, but I've been in this industry long enough to know that, sure, go ahead, is not a legal agreement, and that companies have a way of expanding their interpretation of informal arrangements. So before Greenfield used a single line of my code, I sat down with my attorney, a sharp woman I'd used for a real estate matter a few years prior, and we drafted a proper licensing agreement. Clear terms. The tool remained my intellectual property. Greenfield had a non-exclusive license to use it internally, no right to sub-license, no right to modify and redistribute, annual renewal. Aldridge signed it. Legal signed it. I have a copy in my office at home and a scanned copy in 3 separate cloud accounts. When Brent arrived 11 months ago, that agreement was still active. He had no idea it existed. As far as he was concerned, the compliance tool was just part of the infrastructure, a thing the company used, like the HVAC system or the parking lot, something that was just there. After the Monday call, I called my attorney. I told her what was happening. She asked me 2 questions. Was I prepared to not renew the license at the next renewal date, and had I kept documentation of everything Brent had said to me? The answer to both was yes. She told me to keep documenting, keep notes, dates, times, exact words. She told me not to resign under any circumstances, that if they wanted me gone, they were going to have to do it formally, in writing, for cause, and then defend that cause. She said the word resign from a manager's mouth, unprompted and without a formal process, was something she found very interesting. I went back to work. I did my job. I did it well. I kept my head down. Brent escalated. 2 weeks after the call, I received a performance improvement plan. This is the corporate version of the countdown clock. It's how companies build a paper trail to justify a termination they've already decided on. The PIP listed concerns that were vague to the point of being meaningless. Things like communication style needs development and difficulty adapting to evolving team culture. There was nothing specific, no incidents, no metrics, no dates. My attorney called it thin. She told me to respond to the PIP in writing, professionally, point by point, and to request specific examples for every vague concern listed. She told me to send it through my company email so there was a time-stamped record. She told me to copy HR. I did exactly that. HR got involved. An HR representative, a careful, quiet woman who clearly did not enjoy being caught between a manager with a mandate and a 19-year employee with documentation, set up a meeting. In that meeting, Brent repeated his concerns about my adaptability. I asked politely which specific incidents or performance metrics formed the basis for each concern. He didn't have an answer. He said it was more of a general pattern. I wrote that down too. The licensing renewal date was coming up in 6 weeks. I hadn't decided yet what I was going to do. Part of me wanted to renew it, keep my head down, survive Brent's tenure the way I'd survived the others. The longer I thought about it, the more I realized I was thinking about it wrong. This wasn't about surviving Brent. This was about what I was willing to accept as the terms of my own professional life. I am 53 years old. I have a mortgage that's almost paid off. My son is in college, good school, partial scholarship, manageable loans. My wife works. We're not rich, but we're not desperate. I had options that a lot of people in my position don't have, and I knew it. So I made a decision. I told my attorney I would not be renewing the license. Under the terms of the agreement, I was required to provide 60 days written notice before the renewal date if I intended not to renew. I sent that notice, formal, professional, with a copy of the original agreement attached, to Greenfield's legal department. I copied HR. I copied Brent's manager, a regional director named Calloway who I'd met twice in person but corresponded with occasionally. I did not copy Brent. I want to be precise about the timing here because this matters. I sent the non-renewal notice on a Thursday. Brent found out on the following Monday, which I know because that was the day Calloway called him, and Calloway's assistant sent me a meeting invite for Tuesday that said, Compliance Tool Transition Discussion in the subject line. Brent called me that Monday afternoon before the meeting was even scheduled. He didn't sound like himself. The performance and the rolled-up sleeves and the standing desk energy were gone. He sounded like someone who had just been told the building he was standing in didn't actually belong to the company. Hal, he said. What is this notice from legal? I said. It's a non-renewal notice for the licensing agreement on the compliance audit tool. The agreement expires in 58 days. He was quiet for a moment. What licensing agreement? And there it was. 11 months. He'd been in this building, using this tool, making decisions that depended on this tool, and he had never once asked what it was, where it came from, or whether the company actually owned it. The one that was in place before you arrived, I said. The tool is my intellectual property. I licensed it to Greenfield in 2022. The license is expiring. Another pause. You can't just... He stopped. Started again. This is going to create a serious problem for the Q4 compliance audit. I know, I said. Hal, I think we should talk about this. I think your legal department will want to be part of that conversation, I said. I'll see you at the meeting tomorrow. I hung up. The Tuesday meeting was not what Brent expected. Calloway was there, and so was someone from legal, and so was the compliance officer. A meticulous man named Fitch who had been quietly depending on my tool for 2 years and had, I suspect, a very unpleasant weekend once he found out it might disappear. There was also an HR representative. Brent arrived last. He sat down and didn't make eye contact with me. Fitch opened by asking whether the non-renewal was final. I said it was my current intention. He asked if there was anything that might change my intention. I said that was a good question and I was open to discussing it. What followed was 2 hours of conversation that I will remember for a long time, not because it was dramatic, it wasn't really, but because of the particular quality of silence in that room every time someone asked a question and the answer made the situation worse than they thought. The legal representative confirmed that the licensing agreement was valid and that the IP belonged to me. She confirmed that the company had no claim to it based on the employment agreement I'd signed in 2004, because the tool was developed entirely outside of work hours with no company resources, and because, critically, the original licensing agreement explicitly acknowledged this. Aldrich had signed that acknowledgement. It was binding. Fitch asked how long it would take to replace the tool's functionality if I didn't renew. He looked at his own team when he asked it, not at me. His team told him somewhere between 8 months and a year for a comparable custom build, or a significant ongoing cost for a commercial alternative. One that, they noted, would require integration work that would take several months regardless. Q4 was 11 weeks away. Calloway looked at Brent for a long moment. It was not a warm look. Then Calloway looked at me and asked directly whether there was a version of this situation where I remained with the company and continued to maintain the tool. I said there might be. We took a break. During the break, Brent approached me. He didn't apologize exactly. I don't think he's built for that, but he said something like, "I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot." I nodded. I didn't offer anything back. I documented the PIP, the Monday call, every conversation. My attorney had advised me to let the company come to me, not the other way around. When we reconvened, Calloway made a proposal, a new role. Senior Technical Advisor, reporting directly to Calloway, not to Brent. Compensation increase, formal acknowledgement in writing that the compliance tool was my intellectual property and that my continued involvement was voluntary, a new licensing arrangement with terms more favorable to me. And the PIP, Calloway said, looking at Brent in a way that ended any discussion, would be withdrawn. I asked for 48 hours to review with my attorney. She looked at the proposal and said it was fair. She made 2 small modifications, added language about severance protections in case the role was eliminated within 24 months, and clarified the renewal terms on the new license. Calloway accepted both without pushback. I signed the agreement on a Thursday. 11 weeks before Q4, my wife asked me that night if I felt good about it. I thought about it for a minute. I told her I felt something more specific than good. I felt like I had understood something clearly and acted on it without panic, and that the outcome had matched the preparation. She said, "So you feel like yourself?" "Yeah," something like that. What I want to say to anyone listening to this, because I know some of you are in situations that feel like mine felt in those weeks, is that the leverage wasn't something I manufactured after Brent started pushing. I wasn't scheming. I wasn't planning some elaborate revenge. I just did the work. Protected what was mine through proper legal channels, and documented everything honestly when things started going sideways. The mistake people make is thinking they have to fight back immediately. React. Match the aggression. Brent wanted me reactive. A reactive me would have argued about the PIP, gotten emotional in meetings, said something that could be used against me. A reactive me might have even resigned just to end the discomfort. Instead, I called my attorney. I wrote things down. I let the calendar do the work. I still work at Greenfield. I work for Calloway now, on projects that actually use what I know how to do. Brent is still there too. His mandate has been quietly scaled back, and I hear he's interviewing at other companies. I don't have anything against him personally. I really don't. He's 34 and he's going to spend the next decade learning things the hard way, the same way most of us do. I just decline to be one of those lessons on his terms. The compliance tool still runs. I maintain it. I will continue to maintain it under an agreement that reflects what it's actually worth and what I actually built. I documented the process. I waited for results. That's the whole story. I've thought a lot about what actually happened in that situation. Not the legal mechanics of it, but the deeper logic underneath. Brent didn't lose because I was smarter than him. He lost because he never stopped to ask what he didn't know. He walked into a building with 19 years of institutional history and started making decisions like a man who'd read the map but never looked out the window. That's not a character flaw unique to him. That's what happens when someone confuses authority with understanding. He had the title, he had the mandate, he had the confidence. What he didn't have was curiosity. He never once sat down and asked, how does this actually work? What holds this thing together? Who built what we're depending on? That absence, that single missing habit, is what unraveled everything. I think about that when I'm tempted to cut corners in how I understand something. The times I've been most exposed in my career were never the times I worked too hard. They were the times I assumed I already had the full picture, what I did. Building that tool, protecting it properly, documenting everything honestly when things went sideways, none of that was dramatic in the moment. It was just disciplined. I wasn't thinking about leverage when I drafted that licensing agreement with my attorney in 2022. I was thinking about doing the thing correctly. That's it. Doing it correctly the whole way through, with no shortcuts, because shortcuts seemed convenient right then. That discipline, made in a quiet moment 3 years before any of this happened, was the only thing that mattered when it counted. There's something I want to say carefully, because I don't want it to sound like a lesson I'm handing down from somewhere above this story. I'm 53, I've made plenty of mistakes, but the pattern I've noticed, in my own life, in the lives of people I respect, is that the people who come out of hard situations intact are rarely the ones who reacted the fastest or fought the loudest. They're the ones who built something real when nobody was watching, protected it correctly, and kept their heads when someone tried to shake the moose. Brent pushed. I didn't push back. I called my attorney, I wrote things down. I let the calendar do the work. That's not passivity. It's a different kind of strength. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The kind that doesn't need Brent to know he's losing until he's already lost. My wife asked me if I felt good about how it ended. I told her what I actually felt was that I'd recognized something clearly and acted on it without panic. That the outcome matched the preparation. That's a feeling worth more than winning an argument. You can win an argument and still be wrong about the deeper thing. What I wanted, what I got, was to understand the situation accurately and respond to it honestly. Everything else followed from that. That's the only thing I know how to tell you. Build real things, protect them properly, document honestly, and when someone tries to move faster than the truth can travel, let them. The calendar always catches up.